Tinkerbell and her fairy friends from Pixie Hollow were on their way to bring summer to the mainland. Summer needed the fairies' constant attention, which meant that Tink was going to be on the mainland for months instead of days. She was very excited. Tink and her friend Terence, a dust keeper fairy, landed in a clearing. Tinkerbell looked around the peaceful meadow. "Where is everyone?" "Tink," said Terence. "Fairy camps is in here." He walked over to a huge oak tree and pulled back a thick tangle of leaves. "Wow," cried Tink. Hidden beneath the tree, an entire fairy community bustled with activity. Just then, a loud crack went through the fairy camp. Fawn knocked over some paint that fairies were using to decorate butterfly wings, and the splattered butterfly took off. The loud noise made Tinkerbell very curious. The other fairies hid, but Tinkerbell just had to see what had made the noise. Vidya chased after her, trying to get her to come back. Tink ignored her and flew down to examine the car after the humans had gone into their house. "This is amazing," Tink said. "Those wheels back there move because this chain thing rotates." Tinkerbell darted inside the engine. She found an interesting looking lever and turned it over and over again. Outside the car, each turn of the lever showered Vidya with water. Tink flew back out and looked Vidya up and down. "You're all wet," she remarked. Just then, the door to the house opened and out walked Lizzie and her father, Dr. Griffiths. Tink and Vidya froze, but they didn't need to worry. The humans' attention were focused on a butterfly. "The wings have two entirely different patterns," Dr. Griffiths observed. "Well, I guess that's just the way the fairies decided to paint it," Lizzie said. "Fairies do not paint butterfly wings because, as you know, fairies are not real," her father declared. If Vidya hadn't stopped her, Tinkerbell would have flown out and proven that fairies existed right then and there. Meanwhile, Lizzie was playing with a small house she had built. "Would you like to help me with it?" she asked her father. "I'm sorry, dear," Dr. Griffiths said. "I have to present my exhibit to the museum tomorrow. Now run along." Tink and Vidya were exploring. "Wow," exclaimed Tink. She landed next to a row of buttons lined up like stepping stones. "These will be perfect for the new wagon prototype I have been working on." "I'm not carrying this human junk back to camp," began Vidya. But then she spotted something that made her stop in her tracks. It was Lizzie's fairy house. Vidya wanted to leave, but Tinkerbell headed straight for the house. Tink went inside of the house, ignoring Vidya's warnings that humans could be dangerous. Frustrated, Vidya whipped up a gust of wind that slammed the door shut. Tink didn't mind. She was having fun exploring the tiny house's gadgets. Suddenly, Vidya saw a human approaching in the distance. She pulled on the door to let Tink out, but it was jammed shut. Lizzie went to pick up her fairy house and was amazed to see a tiny fairy inside. Finally, she had proof that fairies were real. She started running back to her home while Tinkerbell bounced around inside of the fairy house. The little girl went upstairs to her room and peeked in the fairy house, but Tinkerbell was nowhere to be seen. "Where have you gone?" wondered Lizzie. "She took the roof off the house." Tink darted out. Mr. Twitches, the family cat, immediately lunged for the fairy. As a horrified Vidya watched at the window, Lizzie put Tinkerbell in a bird cage for safekeeping. Vidya knew she had to free Tinkerbell, but she couldn't do it alone. She flew back to the fairy camp to get help. She explained to her friends what had happened, but a storm had just erupted. "We cannot fly in the rain," Fawn reminded her, "and the meadows already flooded." Clank and Bobble had a plan. They were going to build a boat. Back at the country house, Lizzie let Tinkerbell out of the cage. "You don't have to be scared," said Lizzie. "I'm very nice. Look, I've been drawing fairies all my life." Tinkerbell was amazed by Lizzie's fairy collection. But as Lizzie described what was going on in each picture, Tink realized the little girl had her fairy facts all wrong. Tinkerbell pointed to the window. You want to go? Asked Lizzie. I understand. She went to the window and opened it wide. Tink made it as far as the window sill and stopped. It was pouring outside. Can't you fly in the rain? Guessed Lizzie. You can stay with me until it stops. Then you can teach me more about fairies. Back on the ferry boat, the rescuers were in a panic. They were headed straight for a waterfall. Thinking quickly, Vidya hovered in front of the boat and created a burst of wind. The boat started to turn around. Then suddenly, several large raindrops soaked Vidya's wings and she had to stop. The boat was swept towards the falls again. Hang on, we are going straight down, yelled Bobble. At the last second, silver mist made water rise up so that the drop wasn't as steep. The boat crashed on shore, but the fairies were alright. I guess our sailing days are over, said Bobble. Back at the house, Tink and Lizzie created a fairy field guide filled with information about the world of fairies. By the time they were done, the rain was letting up. Tinkerbell and Lizzie both realized it was time for Tink to go home. As much as she was going to miss the little girl, Tink was really excited to get back to her fairy friends. But as Tinkerbell was flying away from Lizzie's house, she saw the little girl trying to show her father the fairy field guide. Dr. Griffiths was too busy to fix the leaks in their home to listen to Lizzie. Tinkerbell watched Lizzie walk sadly away from her father. Tink realized she had to find a way to bring father and daughter together and make them happy again. Lizzie thought Tink had left, but to Lizzie's surprise, Tinkerbell suddenly appeared. The look of joy on Lizzie's face let Tink know that coming back had been the right thing to do. Lizzie went to sleep and Tinkerbell watched as Dr. Griffiths came up to check on her. There just aren't enough hours in the day, he said to his daughter. It warmed Tink's heart and she felt even stronger about finding a way to help them. Meanwhile, the other fairies were continuing their mission to find Tink on foot. Vidya spotted the muddy road that led to Lizzie's house. Vidya helped her friends across but then got stuck in the mud herself. Silver Mist, Fawn, Rosetta and Iridesa grabbed onto her and pulled, but she wouldn't budge. The fairies saw a car coming at them, but Iridesa was able to save them by reflecting the light from the car. The driver got out of his car. Hello, is somebody out there? He asked. Fawn grabbed his shoelace and instructed the others hold on tight. When the driver turned to leave, they were all pulled out of the mud. Back at the house, Tinkerbell had an idea. She secretly fixed all of the leaks in the house for Dr. Griffiths. Before she returned to Lizzie's room, she couldn't help but notice the butterfly fluttering in a jar on Dr. Griffiths' desk. It made Tink feel terrible to see the poor creature trapped and helpless. Lizzie went to show her father the fairy book. When she reached her father's office, Lizzie could see Dr. Griffiths was upset about something. The butterfly is gone, he announced. There is no one else in this house. There's only one logical explanation. It must have been you. I didn't, replied Lizzie. It must have been who? Dr. Griffiths asked. I could tell you, father, Lizzie declared, but you wouldn't believe me. Very well, Dr. Griffiths said. Off to your room. I'm very disappointed with you. Back in Lizzie's room, Tinkerbell was apologizing for getting the little girl into trouble. I'm glad you are here, Lizzie told Tink. You are my best friend. I wish I were a fairy just like you, then I could fly around with other fairies all the time. That gave Tinkerbell an idea. She instructed Lizzie to close her eyes and spread out her arms. Then the fairy hovered above Lizzie's head and showered it with pixie dust. Downstairs, a door creaked open. All clear, announced Iridesa. The fairies entered the kitchen. Okay, began Vidya. Tinkerbell is upstairs. The little girl has her in a cage. There's also a large human in the house who doesn't like creatures with wings. The fairies looked at each other in alarm. Great, Fawn exclaimed. Anything else? But before Vidya could reply, the fairies had their answers. Mr. Twitches was standing in the doorway. Meanwhile, Dr. Griffiths heard strange noises coming from upstairs. What's going on in here? Dr. Griffiths demanded when he went to investigate. Lizzie tried to act normal, but the pixie dust hadn't worn off yet. She had to hold on to the furniture to stop herself from floating off the floor. How did you get footprints on the ceilings? Her father continued. Well, began Lizzie. I was flying. My fairy showed me how. While the other fairies distracted Mr. Twitches, Vidya headed to save Tinkerbell. Vidya got there just as Tink revealed herself to Dr. Griffiths. He tried to catch Tink, but Vidya pushed her out of the way. Dr. Griffiths ran out of the house with Vidya. "I must get this to the museum right away," declared Dr. Griffiths as he dashed down the stairs. The other fairies had tamed Mr. Twitches with some catnip that Rosetta and Fawn found. They rode on the now friendly cat and entered Lizzie's room. Tinkerbell and Lizzie were trying to figure out how to get Mr. Griffiths to release Vidya. "We cannot fly," said Tink, "but I think I know somebody who can." Lizzie was nervous as the fairies bundled her up in a rain slicker and hat. "Floating around my room is one thing," she told Tinkerbell, "but flying all the way to London." The fairies swirled around Lizzie and showered her with pixie dust. "All aboard," cried Tinkerbell. Tink settled under Lizzie's collar while the other fairies tucked themselves into her raincoat pockets. Lizzie had a rough start but soon was maneuvering smoothly above the country road that led to the city. A little while later, the magnificent sight of London came into view. Once they got closer, Tinkerbell flew into the car's engine and brought the car to stop. "Father," Lizzie called. Dr. Griffiths turned to see his daughter flying towards him, pixie dust trailing behind her. Dr. Griffiths couldn't believe his eyes. "How are you doing that?" he asked. "There is no feasible scientific explanation. It has to be magic." Lizzie smiled. "It is magic," she told him. "But where does it come from?" Dr. Griffiths wondered. "Fairies," answered Lizzie matter-of-factly. Then Lizzie told her father that they had to take the fairies back to the country. Seeing Lizzie and the other fairies, her father understood. Seconds later, Vidya was reunited with her friends. Days later, Tink and Vidya sat together sipping their tea. Not only did they know each other better now, but they had actually become good friends. As they watched Lizzie and Dr. Griffiths, they could see that father and daughter were getting to know each other better too. "Beautiful sight, isn't it?" asked Vidya. "Nothing more beautiful in the whole wide world," Tink agreed.